Welcome to the Technology Pulse podcast, hosted by Daily Computers, providing comprehensive technology solutions to the public and private sectors for more than 35 years. Visit www.daly.com to learn more. This episode is brought to you by Barracuda Networks, the worldwide leader in security, application delivery and data protection solutions. And now here's your host, Rick from Daily.
Joining us again on the Daily Technology Pulse podcast, we have Michael Townsend from Barracuda. How are you?
I'm doing well, sir. How are you doing today?
I'm doing quite well, thanks. Michael, I really appreciate you coming back. I know last time we had a great conversation about archiving when it came to emails, and we had some really great response to that. And so one of the things I want to do to kick off today's conversation is I want to see if we can go a little bit deeper, because some of the feedback that we had gotten from the last podcast was, well, this is great that you can archive my emails and I can retrieve stuff. And it was really great information, but people are wondering, does it just stop at email?
Well, with Barracuda, we don't just stop at email. We go another step further. We have other products in our cybersecurity suite that takes care of the other problems inside of Office 365. And one of those products is our cloud-to-cloud backup. If you look at Microsoft Service Agreement 6B, it states that you must get a third-party app to really back up your data. So we came up with a third-party integration app that integrates into Microsoft and is an API driven. You have to have admin credentials and you don't have to have service accounts or anything like that. You just go in, add your credentials, and it will tie into the back end of the Office 365, and you can back up your SharePoint, your Teams, your OneDrive. And with that backup, it gives you the immutable backup for end-to-end encryption, securing all your Microsoft 365 data. So that's just one of the other products that we can go from the discovery to now recovery if we need to with Microsoft data.
And that's really important today, particularly with, again, the hybrid workspace or the remote workspace, because a lot of business these days gets done not just over email. It used to be if you wanted to write to somebody, you emailed them. And if you wanted to do anything other than email them, you would go down the hall and pop into their doorway. But that's not quite it these days. I mean, Teams, it's messages sent in Teams. You send files over Teams. SharePoint, the same thing. I mean, all that information lives in SharePoint. And if you didn't have your SharePoint, and I know a lot of people have their computers, their devices set up just to have their documents and their desktop files all directly just copy over to SharePoint so that they have that backup. Yeah. Could you just imagine the amount of data that would be lost if you lost all of that?
Well, that's kind of the problem too. And, in the SLED government, in K through 12 and government and all that, we don't have a lot of space a lot of times because we don't have the money to store all that, right? So over time, we're trying to get rid of data to make space for more data on our servers, right? So what do you do with all that? So with Barracuda, we have unlimited backup, unlimited retention policies. Let's say Michael is at work and I worked there for 5 years and it's all backed up to the OneDrive. I leave. That's still getting backed up. It still stays out there unless you put a retention policy yourself out there. We're not going to keep charging you for that because it's unlimited retention. It's unlimited storage. But the cool part about this product is that I leave and Rick comes in and goes, I really need to know what Michael's working on that project. I really need to know those files and have those files. Back in the day, we had servers, so we just gave you access back to your share server on your local network. Well, OneDrive and Teams and SharePoint, it's a little different going back in and trying to give someone access to something else again and give them restore access process. Well, what we do in the cloud-to-cloud backup is that we're able to restore to an alternate location. So I can restore this data to your side if we need to give you access to it. Same with emails. Since we're backing up Exchange. Well, could you imagine that Michael leaves again? We'll use that same scenario. And Rick comes in and says, man, I would love to have all those contacts Michael had Is there a way I can get those? Sure, I can restore it either back to Michael or I can restore it back to Rick's Exchange account as another sub-file called restored files, and you would have all the contacts I had out there. Same with emails. If I want to do emails, you can have my inbox, you can have my subfolders if you needed to.
Now, the context is really interesting because I know for a fact that I have come into situations where I've gotten somebody's emails and I was able to look through the emails, but I've never been able to restore contact lists.
Could you imagine that now?
No, because it's if the contacts in my email or in my cell phone go away, then I'm the person who sits there and puts out the plea on social media. I lost everything. Send me a text if you know me.
Exactly.
Lost all your information.
We had phone books, right? There's not a general phone book or yellow pages anymore like we used to have, So everybody has phones and everybody has it on their computers now. We don't memorize people's phone numbers like we used to do our next door neighbors back in the day. You used to remember, I don't even know my next door neighbor's phone number. I know their name on my phone. I can look it up, right? What happens if it goes away? So that's one of the things about the cloud-to-cloud backup that's really cool is that not only can I restore a single contact or I can restore a single email, I can store the whole contact list, or I can store the whole subfolder of a inbox if I wanted to. Same with SharePoint and same with OneDrive. If there's pieces of folders, or do I need just a single file? I have a way to go in there and search and go back in time and pull that data back to either the original location or to an alternate location.
And let's talk about SharePoint a little bit, because I know a lot of organizations use SharePoint as their intranet, as their internal network. And so if that data is getting backed up, because we've seen this at Daily, we post an article from one of our OEM partners like Barracuda. Mm-hmm. We post it up on our intranet and we tell people, hey, this article is up there. And we leave it up there for a limited amount of time, 30, 60, 90 days, something like that. The day after it disappears from the intranet, somebody contacts us and says, I wanted to read that article, or I want to read that article again, and it's gone. And so you have to go back and you have to try to find the email with the article that you got originally. And then you got to try to repost it because you look in the recycle bin. And of course, it's not there because it's part of that retention policy. So you're saying if somebody puts up a page on SharePoint, if they put up an article on SharePoint where it's, again, meant to be shared internally, and there's no data retention policy on their Barracuda side, they could just as easily just pull that right back up.
Pull it right back up and export it and send it to you, or restore it to an alternate location. You can go in just like you could in the archiver and search for a file. You can do the same thing inside of the cloud-to-cloud backup product. You can go in there and says, I want Rick's.pdf, and go out there and it'll find Rick.pdf if you need to. All the Rick's.pdfs across all the different locations, and bring it up on the list for you. And you can pick the one you need to restore or export out. And
that's really valuable because, again, when you're talking about, like you said, storage space is at a premium these days. Yes. And, I'm constantly getting hit, whether it's the fruit company or whether it's the Google company, where they're constantly telling me your drive is getting too big. And so now I have to go in. It's like Sophie's Choice. Which of my children do I decide that I don't love as much as the other one? Right. which of my files am I going to have to delete in order to get more space? So in an instance like that, so say you're backing up your OneDrive and you have that backup and it's out there in the cloud, and then I delete something out of my OneDrive. Deleting it out of my OneDrive doesn't delete the backup, does it?
No, because it's totally two different things. Because the cloud backup is sitting there. It's not like pulling a file and then saying, oh, Rick deleted it, so we need to delete it from the cloud-to-cloud backup. No, it doesn't work that way. It's built on retention policies, just like you had before with the archiving. So if you don't have a retention policy, it's going to stay out there forever, right? So, and that's the great value of this product is it's simple, fast, easy. way to recover documents due to corruption, let's say ransomware. Maybe you got a file that's been ransomware, or like you said, accidental deletion. You got a user going, oh my gosh, on Friday, I was so in a hurry and I left. We're having weather, like right now I'm having weather in Florida coming up, and everybody's getting ready for the hurricane coming in, and I'm doing stuff and I'm not watching what I'm doing. I start deleting files because I thought they were old in an old folder, but there's actually a new document out there. Well, if it's been in that recovery time frame of being backed up, then the file is backed up, then I can restore that file come Monday if I need to.
And that's perfect. And so you mentioned something that I definitely want to talk about. You mentioned ransomware, because today it's all about cybersecurity. Everybody has to focus on this. The bad actors are getting more and more sophisticated. Their plots and their ploys are getting more and more sophisticated. And it's tough sometimes for even the so-called experts to stay a step ahead of them. It's not really staying a step ahead. It's trying to catch up once they take that extra step. And so you've got every organization out there is, I always say this, one bad email away from losing everything. And so having that cybersecurity perspective where, again, you can recover from ransomware is something that is extremely valuable.
You got to remember the backups that we're putting out there are immutable backups providing end-to-end encryption, securing the data from Microsoft. So we're multiple checking that data as it's going across and getting backed up.
Right. And then on top of that, when you're talking about cybersecurity, you've got a lot of organizations that really need to cover their bases. And so, the first thing that you get asked is if you have this type of backup solution and you have this cloud to cloud backup, is that secure? Does that meet the requirements for, say, an insurer or for, say, a government agency where, again, they're putting those requirements in place? You have to meet this level of cybersecurity in order for everything to be above board.
Yes, and you got to think, so that's one of the things that Barracuda does, I believe, really well. Not just being from working for Barracuda, but running the products myself as a CTO before, was that, the Barracuda backup, the data is further protected by security features, by multi-factor authentication, 5 levels of role-based access controls that determine who can do what, and the end-to-end encryption that's out there. So, when the cybersecurity insurance company goes, how are you backing up? What's the level of backup? We have our trust center. You can go out there and look and see it at Barracuda, what all of our trust centers, all that we can do with your data that's being backed up out there and how we're protecting it.
Excellent. And then you and I had talked briefly about, again, trying to make sure that there's that security, that safety and that security. And that's one thing that our customers have known Barracuda for. And so, again, last time we talked about the email backup. This time we're talking about O365. Is there a level that goes even deeper?
Yeah, so we have another product that I really, truly love. And I'll explain to you more about that in a minute, but it's called our Data Inspector. So is there a neat way to scan Microsoft for improperly stored and sensitive data? What data do you have out there? And I'll go back to government. Who's putting driver's license, car tag information on your OneDrive? What employees are storing Social Security numbers? What employees are storing? We go through K through 12. Did a teacher store all the student IDs on a OneDrive, on a Word document? Those type of needs for reporting tools for regulatory compliance. Customer need a way to gain insights on what sensitive data may need to be presented in OneDrive or SharePoint. Determining where files are stored in OneDrive and SharePoint. The greatest feature of this is, Rick, did you share a file that you shouldn't be sharing? How do we know what files are being shared on? Yeah, you can try to run some reports in Office 365, but what dashboard can really go out there and show you, Rick has this Word document in SharePoint, and he shared it out with 5 different people outside of our organization. What are we going to do? What steps are we going to have to take? Well, our Data Inspector shows us that. And you can set up violations, and it's got 130 plus built-in custom classifiers that determines which sensitive information is looked for by scanning the documents. So if Rick takes a file and scans in a driver's license, and drops it into his OneDrive, that picture of a driver's license, it will pick that up and says, Rick's got this violation of this P2 or PIE information. He hasn't shared it, but it's out there. But let's say tomorrow, Rick goes out there and shares that driver's license information with me that's outside the organization or inside the organization. It will tell us the sharing. And then you have a couple options. Do I want to unshare that and say, call you and say, Rick, you shouldn't have done that because you got this violation? But it'll also notify you and me that you violated a violation. So it'll send you that email notification. Since I unshared it, now you still have access so you can reshare it. Or do I want to quarantine it and take it away from you where you can't do anything with it again? Or do I completely delete it off our network because we don't need it at all? Do I need to completely go out and delete that file? So we have those options out there with the data inspector. So the data inspector goes in and, like I said, 130 plus different identifiers, goes out and looks for any sensitive information. It also scans for viruses because we have our advanced protection in there also. It notifies us that way. But on that dashboard, the reason I liked it is because kids got smart these days. They know that we're watching them in team chats. They know we're watching them, on Facebook, and all these other programs are out there are scanning, watching kids on the internet, right? Kids got smart. They started using Word to chat with each other. So think about this. If a kid takes a Word document, starts typing a chat, and starts sharing it to all their friends, now all these 4 or 5 friends have this one Word document. They're all typing in at the same time. So it becomes just like a chat because it's live on 365, right? Well, one of the things I did was with the data inspector, you can create your own categories. So I created my own keywords out there. Words like send me a pic, let's chat. I put in sexual key terms, words in there that a lot of kids were using at the time. And what that was doing was when they start typing and creating those information and saving out there, it started showing me the violation. So I started picking up all these new Word documents these kids were creating these chats and bullying, cyberbullying other kids too. So it was like their new website, but it was just a Word document. So could you imagine trying to find that kind of information if you didn't have this kind of product? What were you going to use to go out there and kind of get some of that information? Well, that's what I use the data inspector for, not just for violation of P2 and PIE information. I used it for that too, looking at what kids were chatting about because they were trying to, and it's great, they're using technology, right? But they're using the technology in the wrong way. And how do we fix that?
Right. And it's great to have that not only for peace of mind, but again, I mean, to be able to see things that are going on that, like you said, wouldn't normally be picked up because they're not being picked up in a chat. And you find those ways to circumvent. Now, I have a question for you. Going back to, this type of scanning, because I recently had a situation with a state agency. So I was filing a complaint against somebody, a contractor, and the state had me fill out the form and mail it, which I thought was perfect because it's in the mail. It's a hard copy document. Unless somebody goes and commits a federal offense where they're taking something out of the mail, all of the information that I put on there, my driver's license number, my social security number, my phone number, all of the information that I don't necessarily want to go public is all on that form. The agency took the form that I mailed in, scanned it, and sent it over email to the person that I was having the issue with, that I had filed the complaint against. So they took my personal information
and
sent it to somebody on a Gmail address. Would your solution have picked that up?
If they would have stored it on OneDrive or SharePoint, we would have picked it up because it would have been probably in a PDF file or something. So it would have been saved and shared out there so they can turn around and reattach it, right? Because they'd had to scan it in somehow.
Right.
And more likely they'll scan it into a file on a server somewhere. So as soon as they scan it into that file, if it's on OneDrive or SharePoint, we would have picked it up. And then we would have picked up that information of your social security number, of your driver's license number, would have picked up that information. The cool feature of that, let me go a step over that real quick, is that if we do find that information and I'm the administrator and we're in a legal request once I pull that information up and Barracuda pulls it and brings it to the dashboard, or we're searching for that information and it comes up, it redacts all your information automatically. So as administrator, I don't get to see the social security number. It'll say there was a driver's license or social security number in this spot, but it'd be blanked out with a color, like I couldn't see through it. Like someone took a highlighter and blacked it out in black ink. Ours is blue, but you couldn't see it. So now if I go to court and someone goes, well, you looked at it, you saw the information, what did you do with it? I didn't see anything. It was redacted, and all I did was unshare it and took the ability from the person using it. And this is the policies and procedures we went through at this point after we found this violation and what we did to take corrective actions. So I'm not in the hot seat.
And the hot seat is not a fun place to be.
No, it's never a fun place because you know how lawyers are. They will find a way to try to make you look bad any given way, any given day. No matter, you're just trying to do your part of the job.
Well, I mean, that's how they earn their money. But yes, I mean, and the funny thing is, you see lawyers on television. And again, I'm not trying to disparage any profession. Lawyers, absolutely necessary in the world.
Necessary.
But you do see them on television and you see how people get treated in court, and everybody says, oh, that doesn't really happen in real life. That's just for television. No, it happens in real life.
No, it happens. It happens. And when you're in those in discovery, especially in the SLED division, and you're in government or education, they're really asking a lot of these questions about what did you see? How did you handle the data? What did you do with the data as an administrator, right? So they want to know the key processes of that. So you really got to have your procedures and policies in place. And programs like this helps you show the process, because then you have a message log that you can go back to and you have some proof out there. This is what we did at this time. Yes, we unshared it. Yes, we deleted it off our network. Yes, we did this. And here's the log files to show what we did.
And having that paper trail.
Paper trail.
Well, you know, we call it paper trail. It's a digital paper trail.
There's another word for it, but we can't say that out loud. So
no. Having that evidence, having that proof.
There you go.
That's what helps people in higher positions sleep better at night. Yes. And even the people who aren't in higher positions, knowing that I couldn't mistakenly share something without it being flagged, knowing that I could very easily have that fail safe. So that, again, if I'm storing this information in my OneDrive, if I'm storing this information on SharePoint, if I'm storing this information, or this information comes to me over Teams, knowing that I have that backup behind me where, again, it's not going to go away. And if it's got sensitive information in it, it's going to get flagged. I mean, that's, to me, to say that it would help me sleep better at night would be an understatement. To say that it would help me keep my job would be completely accurate.
One thing I can say is that is one of the greatest things about these two products. I will say, though, on the data inspector, we don't see the actual chat messages. I don't know. Barracuda is working with Microsoft, but that's become a very delicate situation with the teams, actual chats. When we back up teams or we do the data inspector, it doesn't do the team chats and stuff like that, but it does the channels on the cloud-to-cloud backup. So when we're backing up, a lot of people asking our discovery questions and stuff, well, how about the chat messages when you do cloud-to-cloud backup? Well, we don't do that at this time. It's trying to be on a roadmap, but there's a lot that goes on with the actual messages. When we back up teams, we're backing up all the channels that's out there that's created by those groups of people. So if you create a channel with a group of people and you share files and all those channels, just like you do in SharePoint, we do back all that up, though, inside Teams.
And that's good because, again, sometimes what you say in Teams, I mean, it's almost like water cooler talk.
Yeah, it is.
So you don't really need all of that. But again, if I'm sharing, there've been so many times where I've shared a PowerPoint or I've shared a PDF document or a graphic that I'm desperately trying to find it later on.
Yes.
Or, I've also had where somebody sent me something and 3 months later, I'm like, oh, I need to go back and I need to edit that document. Well, now I no longer have access to it because the retention policy is gone. It was only retained for 90 days.
Yeah.
And then I go back to the person and I go, well, I can't find it either. Now we're both in trouble. So having, again, that where you can then say, look, this document was shared over Teams. I can tell you when it was shared because I've got the timestamp right here, but the document is no longer active. It was on their OneDrive. Be able to pull that right up.
Yes. And to be able to share to be able to even just go search for that document now to the administrator and go, I deleted it, or it's gone for retention policy because I deleted it. But now I have this client, I have this customer that really needs this file. Can you go out? Here's the name of the file. Or I think the name of the file was this. Can you go search for it? Yes. Give me about 15 minutes. Let me go to my computer and go pull it up. And it takes no time to go find because it's all out there on the Barracuda's dashboard. So you'll be able to go and search for those files. So it makes it real nice. I know as an administrator, it made it nice when my superintendent or my CSFO coming to me is like, we got this PowerPoint that we're supposed to have saved because internal auditors needed it now. And I'm like, well, what was the name of it? When was it? And, give me some information. Now I'm not having to go search through all these servers. I can go to one place, one dashboard, and go pull it up.
It's using the old adage, the easiest way to find a needle in a haystack is to use a really powerful magnet.
There you go. And we're trying to be that magnet every day. We're pulling out the bad stuff and giving you only the good stuff.
Excellent. Michael, anything we haven't covered for today?
No, sir. I think we've covered a lot with cloud-to-cloud backup and data inspector. And, if there's any more information that you would like or someone wants to like, they can contact Barracuda and we can talk more about it.
Sounds perfect. We will certainly put them in touch with you if they need that. Michael, it has been an absolute pleasure once again to have you on the podcast. Hey, we're going to have to try for a third.
Third, I'm all for it. I love doing these with you, Rick. You know that.
I do. Well, I have not had a 3-time guest yet, so let's see if we can make you the first.
All right. Sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Technology Pulse podcast produced by Daily. Before we go, we would like to remind you of a few legal considerations. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of Daily or its leadership. This podcast is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended to provide legal, financial, or other professional advice. The content of this podcast is protected by copyright laws and may not be reproduced, distributed, or transmitted without the written permission of Daily Computers Inc. Any products, services, or other references mentioned in this podcast are for informational purposes only, and do not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by Daily. Thank you again for listening. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to contact us at marketing@daily.com.